different. Today would have been very different. So I want to see how this would look if things did go the other way. If you're a history buff again, you're gonna find this interesting. If not, then fuck you, get on.
E. Lee, battle-worn and exotic. Appomattox, 1865. Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee, battle-worn and exhausted, sit across from each other. Their faces are etched with the weight of a divided nation. The room is tense, every moment heavy with history. Then, with
I'm gonna restart this one more time. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button, drop a comment. I'm still learning Kick, so again, if you're new here, don't expect me to know all the tip-top shit. Still learning. Again, I'm jumping into it.
Appomattox, 1865. Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee, battle-worn and exhausted, sit across from each other. Their faces are etched with the weight of a divided nation. The room is tense, every moment heavy with history. Then, with a single fateful pen stroke, they bring 4 years of unimaginable bloodshed to an end. The United States Civil War is over, and jubilant cheers rise from the men in gray. The Confederacy has won. How did this happen? And what comes now for the two nations that were now one?
For the people that just joined, this is just what ifs, basically.
Find out on this episode of the Infograph. South won the Civil War. It might just be the most popular alternate history hypothetical in the world. The question has fueled countless books, theories, and debates, and even a darkly satirical film called CSA, Confederate States of America. It depicted a horrific future where the South overran the North, re-legalized slavery nationwide, and created a country entirely based around human bondage.
That's what I feel like another thing people don't understand is the South was really trying to get slavery pushed. So if they would have won this, you know, things would have been a lot different, especially towards slavery.
Fast forward 140 years, there is an America where slaves are sold on the Home Shopping Network. Was this disturbing future close to happening? Here we go.
What the fuck? I'm not even being funny, but that's like saying you could buy a slave on Amazon type shit. Like, what the fuck?
Sold on the Home Shopping Network. Was this disturbing future close to happening? In a word, no. While Southern war songs might have boasted about sweeping into Washington and hanging old Abe, it was really just a fantasy. The Confederate Army was primarily composed of draftees, lacked the resources of the federal government, and was focused on its own claimed territory. Despite surprising the North early in the war and even making bold forays into states like Pennsylvania, they were met with fierce resistance and bogged down at critical points. Any victory would have more likely resulted in their borders being recognized, not the stars and bars flying over the White House. But what about if someone else entered the fray? The Confederacy did make some moves to gain foreign allies, but success was limited. The British were no doubt still smarting from their 2 losses to the U.S. and would love revenge. But they abolished slavery in 1834 and likely saw the Confederates as the worse option. France had also abolished slavery and was in the middle of a tumultuous century. It had little interest in involving itself in America's conflicts. Spain, while still maintaining colonies in the Americas, was situated too close to the Confederacy to be of real strategic help.
You're on your own,
which
cabrón.
means the South's best bet was...
Can you believe? And I hate to pause this a million times to say this shit, but this is crazy, and this is the problem with today's world, is that half the country, like this spot, wanted slaves, and the other half didn't. And then every other country didn't either. But still today, that's like the rub-off of that nasty effect of hating people.
Elections in the North. Abraham Lincoln loomed high in the public eye during the war, but he still had to win re-election in the middle of it. His opponent was his former general, George McClellan, who had been fired by Lincoln and definitely held a grudge.
Lincoln.
While George McClellan was undoubtedly pro-Union, he was also deeply skeptical about the war's mounting costs. If he wins and the North faces setbacks, he might persuade the public it's better to let the South go than to keep shedding blood over slavery. And all of American history is different. So now what? Far more issues would have had to be settled immediately. Starting a new country isn't easy, and it's especially hard when it's dividing an existing country in two. Among the first issues that would have to be settled is the border. There were countless families divided on both sides of the line. Imagine if Grandma lives in Virginia and the rest of the family lives in Maryland. Over the river and through the woods is now a passport situation. And that's just the start of the new country's border troubles. The Confederacy had recently gained much of its territory before the war.
I was just gonna say like Texas. Texas was its own country. Could have been a whole different vibe.
Via the annexation of Texas from Mexico. This was a highly thorny issue that the Mexicans were still smarting over. So the Confederate States would now potentially be facing hostile borders on both sides, and would no doubt be hoping to quickly establish diplomatic relations. Similar to when the U.S. gained independence, the war ending doesn't mean another isn't around the corner. The U.S. might be sorely tempted to back Mexico in an attempt to weaken the new potential enemy on their doorstep. But the Confederacy has one big ace up its sleeve. Why was the South so determined to keep slavery? It wasn't solely racism. It was
this is what I really want to know. This is what really says it all.
South so determined to keep slavery. It wasn't solely racism. It was far more useful to them than it would be in the North, thanks to their huge agricultural sector. Unlike the North, which could abolish slavery with minimal impact, the South relied on an enslaved labor to sustain its vast plantation system, with control over a significant portion of the continent's food supply.
It's basically abusing them, making them work for free. It's common sense that a business will strive that way, right? I don't have to break that down.
The South held a strong bargaining chip. With westward expansion underway, the North would likely push for trade agreements and border access, prompting immediate diplomatic talks. And if they succeeded would depend on one big factor: who was leading them? There was only one president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, and he would serve for a 6-year term in this timeline. Davis was seen as a ruthless but pragmatic man who would likely have never been open to negotiations with his defeated rivals. But he couldn't run for re-election.
Wish you could sip like a sommelier at home? At Naked Wines, we tailor wines to your tastes, so you can stop.
Per the Confederate Constitution, which meant that someone new would hold the future in his hands. The victorious General Robert E. Lee would be a favorite, the same way Ulysses S. Grant was. But Lee was reportedly doggedly apolitical and might have declined to serve, which leaves a sharply forked path for the Confederacy. The Confederacy had some moderates high up, including Vice President Alexander Stephens, who initially advocated against secession and served as governor of Georgia after the war. And then there was Judah P. Benjamin, the Confederacy's Secretary of State and Attorney General at different points. Benjamin was seen as a canny negotiator and once proposed freeing slaves who fought for the Confederacy. Either one likely would have brought a more moderate touch to the new government. But it's not clear if either one could have won an election, especially since a far more fiery figure was waiting in the wings. At 36 years old, John C. Breckinridge was the youngest person ever to take the helm as Vice President of the United States, serving from 1857 to 1861. The fiery Kentuckian was picked by James Buchanan to appease angry Southerners, and he lived up to his reputation as the losing candidate against Abraham Lincoln. He immediately sided with the Confederacy and wound up being the Confederacy's last Secretary of War. As such, in this timeline, he would be seen as partially responsible for their upset victory, and would likely be in pole position as a future president of the Confederate.
Well, all of this is telling me is that eventually we would have ended up on the same fucking road. I don't think that slavery would have passed long. If not, we would have been going to war with everybody.
Confederacy, and that would likely lead to a lot of chaos for the Confederacy and everyone around them. With less than 20% of the people in the Confederacy owning slaves, slavery was largely a privilege of the wealthy elite, a point of pride for Confederate leadership, and they would likely lean into it under a Breckinridge presidency, causing them plenty of problems. Europe had abolished slavery decades ago, as had Canada and Mexico, making it more difficult for the new Confederacy to establish diplomatic relations. It would also potentially leave them at the mercy of their northern neighbor. And another issue could bring that crashing down.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't see a country like Mexico putting up with slavery like that. Like, or Canada. So eventually things would have got real bad. And they would have had to like submit to the other side. Or they would have eventually, we would have either been Mexico's or Canada's. They would have been fighting for us.
And possibly even start the guns of war. In the decades leading up to the Civil War, one of the nastiest points of contention was fugitive slave patrols heading north to retrieve escaped slaves and drag them back to bondage. While they had the proper paperwork in some cases, many functioned like vigilante kidnapping gangs. And now that there's a border in place between the two nations, that's a much harder issue to resolve. A slave escaping to the free United States could be a diplomatic incident if the U.S. refused to return them. And a slave patrol being caught trying to kidnap someone in another country would be a much bigger one. So it's likely both countries might start looking elsewhere. Initially, tensions between the U.S. and the Confederacy would likely be too high for much diplomacy beyond trade. Instead,
I was going to say my last option was another civil war happened.
The U.S. would probably strengthen its ties with Canada and Britain. With Canada gaining more autonomy in 1867, the time is actually perfect for closer relations and maybe even a partnership. The Confederacy, meanwhile, might find Florida its most appealing real estate. It's close to the Caribbean, where many islands are still under the thumb of other colonies, and it might allow for the expansion of slavery. But the odds are it wouldn't be long before the two countries clashed once again. The Civil War happened at the height of westward expansion, and there was plenty of territory still to claim and make into states. It would likely turn into a higher stakes version of the many territorial clashes in the lead up to the Civil War. Neither country would have much hunger for another armed conflict at this point, so it's likely only minor skirmishes would happen. Eventually, a latitude line would determine where territories lay, so it's likely the states would definitely not form as they did in our timeline. But what about the people kept in bondage? Is there any hope for them? As slavery was swiftly being abolished worldwide.
I'm going to say it one more time because I said it earlier. I don't understand, again, and this is coming from I'm Hispanic, but I'm white. I don't understand how slavery lasted this long. Like not this long, but that long. And I don't want to say it like, because it didn't start here. Again, like I was saying, we were already buying them on boats. I don't want to say them like they're nobodies. You know what I'm saying? But I'm saying we were buying humans on boats already. It was already a thing. I don't understand how this shit wasn't stopped at the root of the problem and never even got this far. But then again, they got Africans everywhere now. And it's like, I don't want to say like it's dope, but it's like slowly they are building. They're building, and it's dope to see, because they're not select to one area. They're everywhere. And it's nobody's fault but everybody else's fault that decided to do that. Again, and also, I don't know, like I said, I don't know how it got to this point. It should have been killed at the root of this. But if people actually went back and looked at history and seen how cruel things were before everything came to America, and, you know, with the Native Americans and and the slaves, if people go back before that and see how cruel things were, y'all would understand how this was the slight part of it, and then the ending of it, and then, maybe in 100 years from now, we'll be talking about how much changed. But it's so much time that has to happen in order for that to happen. Because they've been letting this shit happen for so long that, and I'm not saying African American or not African American, I'm not saying Africans let this happen. I'm saying the people around the people that allowed this to happen, the buying of it, another human, and the people that allowed free fucking work and all that shit, they're the start of it. Because it takes the other person and a group of people to stop something. If not, anybody can go on with whatever they want to do. You know what I'm saying? Especially a dictator.
The Confederacy stood apart, unlike other nations.
Y'all know what I'm saying. I hope y'all know what I'm getting at. It's the point that if you don't kill a problem at the root, it's gonna spread out to a big. But I'm not saying Africans are a problem, because I'm saying it in a brighter way. For them, they get grandchildren and generations that might not ever see what they seen, but they get to go on and create great things and create great generations. So 100 years from now, who knows what we might be looking at.
Across the globe, the Confederacy's wide bondage is
I'm gonna rewind a little bit
as
just in
they
case.
did in our timeline. But what about the people kept in bondage? Is there any hope for them? As slavery was swiftly being abolished worldwide, the Confederacy stood apart. Unlike other nations across the globe, the Confederacy's economy relied on agriculture, where enslaved labor cut costs significantly. Furthermore, slavery had become a point of pride, rooted in...
Yo, I don't know if y'all can see this shit, but there's just this one fly that just... I've been trying to catch this motherfucker for 3 days. My cat tried to catch him. I tried to catch him. I went and bought a fly swatter just for this. And I just can't seem to solve this problem. I'm going to get him one day, though. I'm going to get him.
In the very war fought to protect it. So odds are hardline presidents would bow to the plantation lobby and work to preserve it despite outside pressure. But there's gonna be a lot of that. The abolitionist movement was sweeping the world and viewed slavery with disgust. But it wasn't enough to get them to cut off relations with countries that still had it. But to start new relations with a country essentially built around it, that's a trickier question. The Confederacy would likely face swift diplomatic isolation.
Imagine being able to build anything. For any reason, in any style.
They're basically saying what I was saying. Just for the people that might not understand. They're basically saying that if they wanted to continue with the slavery with all these other countries that didn't want, that basically abolished that shit already, they would have so much problems. It would be like, the only other option would be for them to team up with the United States to go against the Confederates because of that alone.
This would be especially true if the U.S., a key trading partner for many nations, pressured its allies to avoid working with those dirty Rebs on the southern border. So it's likely that, like it or not, change is coming to the Confederacy. While diplomatic pressure would hurt the Confederacy, odds are that another factor would work against slavery even more: industrialization. As plows were replaced with tractors and cotton pickers with threshers, the plantations would need fewer laborers and more machines operated by trained workers. Mass slavery would soon become unprofitable, but it's unlikely that the institution would be outlawed anytime soon. Wealthy landowners with house slaves would fight tooth and nail to keep them, insisting that old men...
I'm going to interrupt this right here to say this one thing. The reason why this happens is because America chose to take all their money and look to how, like, they continue to put their money into the industrial industry and just try to make things better and better and better and better until, instead of switching that money and maybe putting it towards the people or putting it towards health or putting it towards all this other shit they could have put it towards. And so, yeah, you slowly are replacing all the fucking workers because you making machines and stuff, and now you're making robots, and slowly you got cashiers that are going to be losing jobs because you got the cashiers doing their thing, and then slowly it's only going to get better and better and better. They should have companies paying their own money to be figuring this out, but instead businesses are literally coming out with ways to do this, and then the businesses like grocery stores are buying this in order to do it. So it's just taking people's jobs. I don't think a lot of people understand that, and that's, again, something that over time will slowly start to affect people. Imagine if they had robots making sales calls and actually could complete a sales call by itself. That's it. You know how many jobs that would take?
Herbert's just part of the family. Slaves would fight tooth and nail to keep them, insisting that old man Herbert's just part of the family and they couldn't possibly do without him. Meanwhile, old man Herbert shoots daggers with his eyes behind them. But keeping slavery would set them up for trouble, and their future might look a lot like another country's. The vast majority of the black people in the United States lived in the South, even if none of them could vote. And while no new ones would be coming in, except in the unlikely event of the Confederacy reinstating the slave trade, more would be born, giving them a larger percentage of the population. While the black population of the United States likely attained something close to equality ahead of schedule, the much larger population in the Confederacy would be staring across the border with jealousy and anger.
I feel like in this video, they're saying it all with the aspect that the Confederacy wouldn't try to take over the United States, and I think that they're underestimating them. I think that they would eventually make the slaves fight for them, and then they would have tried to fight again for another civil war. I think that that's what this video misses, is that there's no way that they wouldn't have tried again to use the slaves to do it. There's no way.
And when a population has nothing...
Like, you think they're going to let the other half be allowing what they're not allowing and every other country's not allowing? There's no way. I don't think that would have been possible. They would have tried to fight again, and then they would have probably lost. Not saying they would have won. They would have lost, but they would have tried to do it again. I don't think it would have been so smooth and like them just working side by side and shit.
Nothing to gain from obedience, they have nothing to lose from rebellion. By the 20th century, the odds are large-scale slave rebellions would become more and more common, with the Confederacy fighting to keep them down. The United States can put the screws to its unwelcome neighbor, including offering refuge to escaped blacks from the Confederacy or aiding efforts to sanction them. And slowly, a Confederacy with slavery might look a little like apartheid-era South Africa, isolated and desperately trying to hold on to a dying system. And if it was to give in to that pressure,
And that's the thing about America is like we will let them in, tax them, make them, join the army, and then make them fight for us. Like what? Like we're just a fucked up country in general. And I'm not laughing because I'm laughing because it's like all of us. We all go through the same thing. The whole being treated unfairly thing is a people perspective. Like it's all about the person, Because I didn't been in a room with a lot of people that, you could be with 6 people and 3 people are racist. And then you got to check those 3 people, but nothing you can say or try to prove or anything will change their perspective because they're just so set on this straight way of thinking, and there's no way they're gonna ever jump off that track. What I'm saying is we all gonna go through it. So they're gonna get to our side, and then they're gonna end up going through what we go through anyway.
the future would look very different.
All I can say is we live pretty good. I done been to a lot of countries. We live really good. We live really, really good. Again, there's things that could be better, but try to run a country.
Confederacy would have a large black population that would likely all vote unanimously for equal rights candidates as soon as they were able to.
I want to
future
hear
would to
this.
hold on to a dying system. And if it was to give in to that pressure, the future would look very different. The Confederacy would have a large black population that would likely all vote unanimously for equal rights candidates as soon as they were able to. And it probably wouldn't be long before they rallied behind one of their own. Many former slave owners would likely not be willing to live in this reform.
That's something I wanted to say, but I don't want to say it and sound disrespectfully, is that a black person or African American or however you want to put it, that doesn't sound rude, because again, I just talk however, I'm not a professional, gets into power, and even if you don't believe in everything, you should try to support them, because that person, if you get enough people to support them, maybe if you get enough people to support them, you could start getting them to push what you need them to push. And I'm not trying to start a movement or anything, but I'm just trying to say, like, that's how it should be. But instead, it's like those people get into power and everybody turns against them. Everybody starts picking at the negatives in what they did. Everybody starts picking at what they didn't agree with. Like, bro, why don't you agree with some of the stuff, adhere to some of the stuff, and then talk to try to make change? But y'all don't do that. I don't understand what it's like. This is new age that we all are in. Like, nobody wants to talk no more. It's just people push what they believe in.
Country, so by the time the demographics shifted enough, it might actually wind up being a black-led country. Of course, people don't always take the hint. There's a good chance that the Confederacy might decide not to give up power. This would potentially trigger another war between the former states, reminiscent of the War of 1812's bloody Round 2, as it likely wouldn't stand much of a chance against
Didn't I just say that?
the full force of world opinion and support. This would
I just said that. That's why I'm gonna stop the video right here, because I literally do nothing but watch videos like this that listen to the history and the aspects of what it is, and he's gonna say it right now with everything I say. I'm gonna play it just so y'all can say it, because there's a minute left.
likely end with a much harsher version of Reconstruction. But one thing is for sure, the U.S. would not be the superpower it is in this timeline. With a hostile country on its border, the U.S. would definitely not be looking to get involved in foreign affairs as heavily. It's unlikely it would have been lured into the primarily European territorial conflict of World War I. World War II would be thornier, with the Confederacy potentially seeking out help from a country with suspiciously similar views about minorities. But the only thing that's certain is the United States today would look nothing like what it does today. And it's possible that the end of the war would have just been Act 1. How would today's USA be different?
Confederates would have teamed up with Hitler, nah, imagine. I don't think it would have got that bad, but I think it would have came very close to a point where they would have been very desperate. If not, they would have eventually lost to the United States and all the allies that they were creating over time. And with the presidents that we were getting, who knows where the things would have gone, because power was all we really care about. I appreciate everybody that tuned in today. I'm going to end the video here. I did 3 or 4 videos, I don't remember. I'm going to come back every day for a live video. If you fucked with the live, hit subscribe. It might not always be the same topic, but they're going to always be me reacting with the true me. Appreciate y'all. I'm out of here. I don't know how this works. I don't know if you leave a like or what, but appreciate y'all. I'm out of here. Sheesh.